What's up, y'all? Wes Rucker coming to you from the GoVols247 Podcast here. How are you? I hope you're well. We got a breaking news edition of the GoVols247 Podcast. Going to go over to Ben McKee. And if we're going to Ben McKee for our breaking news podcast, I think you got a pretty good idea why we're doing this. But nonetheless, let's throw it over to Ben. Ben, tell us why we got a breaking news edition of this podcast.
We have a breaking news edition of this podcast because Amari Evans has committed to Tennessee. Amari Evans, who is originally from Pittsburgh, but is playing down in Atlanta at Overtime Elite, a top 100 overall player in the country, a wing who is going to have a chance to play multiple positions just because he's very versatile. I consider him a wing first and foremost, and he will primarily play at the 2 and the 3. But if need be, very much like we see with Jemai Mashack or Josiah Jordan-James, could play the 4. He might also have the option, the ability to handle the ball at times, maybe once he develops a little bit more with his ball handling. So could play 1 through 4 for Tennessee, but a very, very nice wing prospect that Tennessee has picked up, again, playing at Overtime Elite in Atlanta, originally from Pittsburgh, has ties to Zakai Ziegler and the Ziegler family, in addition to the AAU program that Zakai came through. So this is a picture-perfect pickup for Tennessee. If there was ever a Tennessee basketball recruit, mapped out and outlined what a Tennessee basketball recruit looks like for Rick Barnes, Amari Evans is exactly that, to an absolute T. And we at 24/7 have him ranked as the number 80 overall player in the country as a 4-star. I believe that Tennessee is picking up more of a top 50 overall player. I think Tennessee believes that as well. So he's still a top 100 overall player, which is a great thing. But I think that this is going to be a better pickup than even people realize when they see the ranking initially. Tennessee believes it's getting a top 50 overall player in the country, not somebody who's ranked number 80. And not that it matters at the end of the day, but just trying to speak to the importance of this addition, because Amari Evans is a very, very talented player in many ways.
Yeah, I think, Ben, when you think about this kid as a player, maybe 3 words come to mind: Rick Barnes player. It's kind of we've said this a lot, and we say this pretty much all the time. Tennessee gets a commitment, or we talk about the Tennessee roster construction. This program, more than any program that I can ever recall covering in any sport, it has a type. There is a type, and they are very, very adamant about sticking to the script with kinds of guys that they add to the program. And this is one of those young men who every time you hear him described, you think Rick Barnes guy. First off, he is very, very he's a good kid to be around. Which is the very first thing. He's incredibly competitive, but not in like the bad kind of way. He is, has incredibly long arms. Rick Barnes, we used to have it in our intro, and we'll have it again at some point when Rick goes, I do like length, because he does. It's always, I think this kid's 6'5" with 6'10" arms. That's like almost Grant Williams-ish size a little bit, that because Grant's like 6'5", 6'6" with 6'11" arms, I think. So, and then a guy who is very sort of advanced defensively early on in terms of his competitiveness. They absolutely have a type in recruiting, and that's part of the reason why the program needs to break through to the Final Four. But one of the reasons why it's so consistent is because they know exactly who they're looking for. They have their own kind of list in terms of what they want, and they go get it.
Absolutely. And Amari Evans fits Tennessee basketball like a glove. He's smart, has a high IQ. I spoke to his coach at Overtime Elite, Doug Martin, and he was telling me that Amari will text him 3 to 4 times a week, depending on which basketball game Amari is watching at night, the NBA on TNT, or if there's a game on ESPN, this, that, or the other. He'll text them and be like, hey, did you see that action that this team just ran? That's what we tried to do the other day. Or do you think that this could work for us? So he's very much evolved in being a student of the game. Not that he ever lacked IQ before, but he's just a basketball junkie, and just it's all basketball all the time for Amari. And It shows in his IQ. And again, just fits Tennessee like a glove, mostly because of the competitive nature that he has. To me, he's Zakai Ziegler 2.0 from the competitive standpoint, the mindset that he has.
DNA, right?
He's an absolute maniac on the floor, just like Zakai is. And I had somebody tell me who's been recruiting for a very, very long time, in the recruiting space for a very long time, tell me that Amari is the second most competitive recruit that they've been around, or high school player that they have been around in terms of competitiveness. So he absolutely fits Tennessee like a glove. Just mostly from the work ethic is through the roof. Overtime Elites coach told me that Amari is consistently in the top 2 to 3 of getting your shots up for the month. That they're required to, I believe it was 2,000 shots a month they're required to take, and you never have to worry about Amari taking his 2,000 shots. He's well above it, and usually top 2, top 3 on the team consistently in terms of most shots taken that month. So the work ethic matches Tennessee, the competitive makeup matches Tennessee. The mentality, he's a natural leader. Now he's had to, his coach was telling me that he's had to adjust the way that he leads. As a young guy, he thought it was rah-rah, and you just yell at your teammates and that gets the job done. But now he learned how to communicate differently with different personalities on the team. And I don't mean to suggest that Amari was a problem in that regard. It's just he's developing as a leader because he's a young man in high school. So that fits Tennessee to a T as well. And the defense is ahead of the offense right now, but that's not to suggest that he doesn't have any offensive game. He has a lot of offensive game. That's going to be the area that he needs to continue to work on and continue to develop in. But he does have the makings of a really strong offensive player as well. But defense is, on top of the competitiveness and the work ethic, the defense is what Amari Evans is most known for.
Yeah, it's funny too. That's another reason why the 3 buzzwords here are Rick Barnes player, right? They all the time, and some people don't love it or some people question it, but they go get the guys who they know can play defense, and they believe that they can teach them to play better or more consistent offensively. It's listen, there's different coaches. Some coaches say, give me the athletic score and I'll teach them how to play defense. Rick Barnes is, I don't want to teach anybody how hard it is to play defense. You have to want to do that. You have that or you don't. And so, I'm going to get guys who I know can play defense, and then I can help them shoot better. So that, again, it's just, there's different ways to do it. That's the way that Tennessee prefers to do it. And I don't think that's right or wrong. I think that that's just sort of what Tennessee does. There's 2 ways to do it. That's the way Tennessee does it. So I guess since we mentioned that, let's talk about that offense, I guess, first.
Well, let me add 2 more.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Let me add 2 more points on the defensive side. I want to just hammer home quickly how elite of a defender he is, because he is an elite defender. And when I was talking to Doug Martin, the coach at OT Elite, Overtime Elite, he told me that Amari is one of the best defenders that he's been around at this level, and that he is an elite defender. Those were the words that he used on the wing. He's just an absolute dog on the defensive side of the basketball. And I had somebody else tell me that they believe he's the best defender in his class of what is 2025, I believe. So the Tennessee is getting an elite defender. As I continue to say, his high school coach communicated that to me. I had somebody else tell me that they believe he's the best defender in his class. And it is very much Jemai Mashack-esque in terms of being able to help defensively from the jump. He is as advanced defensively as Jemai was when Jemai showed up on campus. And in transitioning to the offense, I do think the offense will be further developed than Jemai once Amari arrives on campus. It's the ball handling and the shooting in which Amari will need to continue to work at. Coach Martin told me that that's something that Amari will always have to work on. And of course, everybody always has something to work on, but that's just something that he will have to stay on top of. And it's not that he lacks form or his shot is so janky that it looks like a foreign concept to him. He has nice fundamentals. It's just about keeping his elbow tucked in there tight, keeping his form tucked in tight, and just knocking down open shots consistently. And that's something Amari told me as well that he's really working on right now, is making sure that he never misses an open shot when it's swung his direction. So the offense is behind the defense, but that does not mean that he has zero offensive game. He has offensive game. He can handle the ball. He can shoot. I had somebody tell me that over the last year, Amari has improved night and day with his shooting. And that's why they felt so convicted that despite him being the number 80 overall player in the country, they felt like Amari was a must-have for Tennessee because he has developed so much with his shooting to go along with all the other intangibles that I mentioned. And it drew the comparison of Josh Hart in the NBA because Josh Hart is a better shooter than people realize, a better scorer than people realize. And that's on top of all the other intangibles that Josh Hart has, just like Amari Evans has. And he just makes winning basketball plays. He rebounds, he defends, he'll make plays on the offensive end. He can distribute. He can knock down shots. So Josh Hart's kind of the pro comparison that I have heard, in addition to Jemai and Zakai for different reasons being the college comparison. So I don't want people to think that Amari has no offensive game. He does have offensive game. It's just he's such an elite defender that it's just not that advanced. See, he's not an elite scorer, but he is a more than capable scorer and capable of doing different things on the offensive end.
Yeah, I would say if there's one thing that people, I think misconception that a lot of people have with basketball, and I understand why, because the people don't get to see some of the things we do in terms of how these guys practice and what they're like when they're just in a gym putting up buckets. And people think, why can't you just shoot? Why can't everybody just shoot? I can go out in the backyard and I can shoot right now. Yeah, so can they. And like the other day in a practice, I remember watching Felix Okpara make like 5 threes in a row, just sitting there goofing around, just sitting there, putting up threes. And this is a guy who would never dream probably of taking a 3 in a game unless it was like you're down by 3 in the final second situation. The difference is the windows that you have are so small in this sport that, if you'll notice in the NBA, anytime a guy gets a clean look from anywhere, inside like 22 feet or 21 feet, like it's in basically, if it's a super clean look because they have time to do it. But in college, you don't have you don't see as many of those guys. And then in high school, you see even fewer. They can all go out there, just give them a ball. Don't pay attention. Just go shoot for a few minutes. They'll make more than you will. But the difference is the windows are so small. So that's why when coaches talk about fundamentals with the elbow, keeping it where it is, how quickly can you get rid of it? I'll never forget Conzo Martin used to go talk to the guys all the time, and people would think of Conzo as a defensive coach, which is fair enough. But he was a guy who in his day could score. And so he would say, he would watch guys just kind of lazily shooting around shots in the gym and say, why are you doing that? You're getting nothing out of this. Like, get it up in a hurry, like you would in the game, because otherwise you're just wasting your time and mine. Go out there and shoot like you would in the game. So that's what I think people, long story short, that's what I think people don't understand about shooting, or some people don't, is that, yes, they all could go shoot the way we could, but they don't get that opportunity.
No, they don't. But Amari is a capable shooter. He'll continue to improve. Again, he's made a massive jump in terms of being able to shoot the ball over the last year. He's a very capable shooter. It's just something that he's always going to have to stay on top of in regards to working on it. And with his work ethic, there's zero doubt that he actually will. But he again, known for work ethic, intensity, and defensive ability, but he is a very capable offensive player. He can shoot. He can pass the ball. He can handle the ball. And I mentioned earlier that he's just kind of a junkie. And the best way to summarize all that is a word that I've already mentioned. He has all the intangibles that you want in a basketball player. He's not a one-trick pony. He can do multiple things. And we did kind of touch on his physicality. You mentioned his wingspan. I don't exactly know what his wingspan is. We do have him listed at 6'5" on his 247 Sports profile page. I don't know what he is at this point, but
6'10",
or how what is six? He's not 6'10". You're speaking to his wingspan.
His wingspan is 6'10".
Yes, thank you. So, but and that's obviously a good thing. But the more impressive thing about Amari is that he's just built like a brick house, just very, very physical. Has rock solid hands, and I say that in a good way. And it's just a very physical presence on both ends of the floor. So he does everything well. He does everything well, particularly on the offensive end. May not have one standout trait offensively, but he checks all the boxes to some degree. And again, the simplest way to summarize it is just that he has all the intangibles. He's a winning basketball player that you want on your basketball team, and he's somebody that is going to be able to help Tennessee as a true freshman. Probably more on the defensive end than on the offensive end. And if he can stay in the right frame of mind as he arrives on campus as a true freshman, I mean, there's going to be a lot of minutes up for grab next year, and he is capable of solidifying a nice portion of those minutes as a true freshman, as long as he continues to work the way that he does. And there's no doubt in anybody's mind that he will. So I'll go back to what I said initially when we pressed record, and that is that Amari may be ranked as the number 80 overall player in the country. I think Tennessee's getting a top 50 player in the country, and I think Tennessee feels the same way. They are very excited about this addition.
Last question I have here about the offense in the first segment. We'll kick it over to more of the defense in the second segment. But, you mentioned that the things that he's always going to have to stay on top of are, his ball handling and his perimeter shooting. So, that would be like, keeping your handles tight, being compact, and then, obviously just being as consistent as you can when you get open jump shots. But in terms of the other parts of the offensive repertoire, in terms of the way that he passes the ball, is he with a 6'5" and a 6'10" wingspan, is he a consistent above the rim finisher? Will he go throw it down when he gets the chance? How would you call him a plus slasher? Would you call him where? Because those are the other parts of the offensive game, like the way you pass the ball, the way that you can slash and score above the rim. Does he have those traits?
Yeah, he checks all those boxes. I mean, I don't think that he's going to slam it home and dunk the basketball like Jordan Bowden did, but he's an aggressive finisher. He can get to the rim. I feel like earlier in his days as a recruit, he was viewed more as a point guard or off the ball guard, and then his body just really took off from a physical standpoint. And I remember, because Tennessee's been recruiting him for quite some time now, before he even moved down to Overtime Elite in Atlanta, back when he was right after, I guess it was in between sophomore year in Pittsburgh and junior year at Overtime Elite in Atlanta. And I remember seeing clips from the AAU circuit of him getting the ball and getting down court in a hurry and finishing through contact, finishing with a dunk, things that you are mentioning. But it was brought up to me that he's a great cutter and slashes to the basket. So like I said, he checks all the boxes that you want. He is very versatile and checks all of those boxes. He passes the ball well. He can handle the ball. He cuts to the basket when he's playing off the ball. He can finish at the rim. So he's a very, very capable offensive player.
Yeah, and I think there's and again, that's not the like his carry tool. The offense is not his carry tool, but it's one that it's a very capable tool. It is the way you hear it described. So that is good stuff, and that's not the best stuff. We'll talk about the best stuff, which is his defense after the break, and we'll talk about where things are with Tennessee and recruiting and all that. But before we do that, step away for just a second, pay some bills, listen to some products, services, in-house ads, etc., and then come right back here on the GoVols247 Podcast. #ad. Welcome back to the GoVols247 Podcast, brought to you by whatever products, services, and in-house ads you just heard a moment ago during that commercial break. Wes Rucker and Ben McKee coming to you, talking about a breaking news commitment for the Tennessee basketball program. The Vols landing Amari Evans, a wing that they really, really like, a guy that, as Ben mentioned many times in the first segment, Tennessee staff believes is a top 50 prospect in the country, a guy who some analysts also believe is a top 50 guy in the country, been kind of consistently rising, and a guy who just checks a lot of boxes and just it is what Rick Barnes wants a Tennessee basketball player to be. I've said for a long time that, this staff has a type, and, I can walk in a gym right now to this day, and I can tell you after watching a kid play ball and then talking to him one time, I could be like, oh, he's more of a Barnes type, or he's more of a Pearl type. Everybody just has their own type. And this kid just kind of checks the boxes for what Rick Barnes and his guys are all about. So this is a big get for Tennessee. We'll have much more to discuss about that after just a quick request from our end to please go in there, take a minute out of your day, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. If you're just listening there on the website, nothing wrong with that. No wrong way to consume the podcast, but really helps us if you go out there on all of those apps where you can get them. Everywhere you can stream or cast the Flying Pod, you can find this podcast. Please go in there and do that. It's also now video. We got the YouTube and the Facebook pages there for GoVols247, which we keep the videos of these podcasts on now. So apologies for that. I know we're not handsome devils, but we do our best. But if you could go in there, again, guys, it just takes a second. Rate, review, subscribe, and those fresh reviews really help with the algorithms. And keep telling your friends too. I love, one of my favorite things is hearing from people around town and the places that we go, of just random people that have told them about this podcast, or random people they've told to go listen to this podcast. It's really one of my favorite things. So if you're already doing all that stuff, thank you. We love you. If not,
I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Defense. Well, this kid, Ben, he really does play some defense. And I'll set this up by saying this. You said something earlier that you think that Tennessee thinks this is one of the most advanced defensive prospects, in the country, and one of the most advanced defensive players they've recruited. And to tell you how much they value this stuff. I was talking to somebody in the program the other day about Bishop Boswell, Tennessee's freshman guard. And I was just saying, I'm not sure, how does Boswell fit into this equation this season? There's a lot of guys in the backcourt. What's going on there? And somebody said, he's a freshman. He already defends like a junior. That means something around here. And so that just lets you know that, hey, if you play defense at a very high level from the jump, you have a chance to step in there and get some minutes. Like if someone like Cameron Carr, continues to struggle with some of the finer points, maybe Boswell starts drinking the milkshake a little bit. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of these guys will not put bad defenders out there on the floor. They just don't, they won't do it. And this kid, Amari Evans, is a guy who I hear some of the stuff that I heard earlier about Boswell, just like within the past couple of weeks, about this kid right now. The words that you're saying, they sound very similar.
They are on the defensive end.
Yes.
I think they are not similar on the offensive end. I think Bishop has a ways to go offensively, shooting the basketball, handling the basketball, to where I think it's going to make it really hard for him to get on the floor this year. Whereas Amari, if Amari's on the floor as a true freshman, it's not going to be 5-on-4 when you're on the offensive end. And I like Bishop. I think he has a chance, but it's just that this is a really important year for him on the developmental side, especially on the offensive end.
Yeah, and I'm not saying they're the same player. I'm glad that you said that though, Ben, because they're not the same player. But it just, that to me, like I was trying to say, even though Boswell's kind of developing offensively, his defense is so good that if things go a certain type of way, we've seen Rick be like, screw it, just put the defensive guys out there and we'll grind it out. And so, but if this kid is like that defensively, but more advantaged offensively, then he could come in and play right away.
Amari, like I said in the first segment, Amari's got a real shot to come in and steal quite a bit of minutes, especially given how many minutes are going to be up for grabs on next year's roster and in next year's rotation. Defensively, the big thing for Amari defensively is just that I mentioned elite a lot in the first segment. I should have narrowed it down and been more specific and said that he is an elite on-ball defender. That physical presence that we talked about, the mindset, the Zakai Ziegler mindset. I mean, he is a dog on the floor. Amari Evans is, and a bit of a maniac. He's as competitive as a high school basketball player as you are going to find. So you pair the physical traits with the mindset, the competitiveness as an on-ball defender. that's a nightmare for offensive players, an absolute nightmare. So, and look, that is something that coaches adore, is on-ball defense and the ability to do that at a high level, and that will absolutely allow Amari a great opportunity to receive minutes next year as a true freshman, and not just as the season wears on, but I think early on from the jump. I mean, I think he's got a real shot to crack the rotation right away. I don't think that that's saying too much or placing too much on him. Again, he's one of those players that has all the intangibles. He's a winning basketball player. You heard Rick Barnes bring up the other night when asked why Chaz didn't play the final 6.5 minutes, Chaz Lanier, the final 6.5 minutes of the Indiana exhibition. And Rick didn't have any problem with his poor shooting night on that evening in Thompson Bowling Arena. It was the fact that Rick did not feel like Chaz was doing anything else to impact the game on top of missing a lot of shots. And for Amari, he's always going to be doing something that impacts the game in a positive manner. If shots aren't going down, very much like Jemai, and this is where I made the Jemai Meshack comparison. If shots aren't going down, he's going to go rebound the ball. He's going to facilitate the basketball. He's going to play elite on-ball defense. So he's just a well-rounded player and just does a lot of things well. And, I mean, he has a legitimate shot to be an NBA player. And the reason I'm talking about it in that sense is because, again, the ranking isn't bad, but the way we're talking about Amari Evans, I think it would come across as to fans as if he was a top 20, top 30-ish type of player in the regard that we're talking about him in. And he's not ranked in that regard. But the feeling about Amari is that he is a much better player and prospect, that even though the ranking isn't bad, it's still better than what it would suggest.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about on-ball defense, you're talking about so many offenses in this era, right? Tennessee does a lot of motions and cuts and things, but a lot of people will just kind of these days still just kind of spread the floor and dribble drive it, and 4 around one or 5 out, and kind of try to break you down off the bounce. And then if you don't have guys who can guard straight up in those situations, you're going to get cooked, because they're just going to spread you out, and they're going to find the guy who can't play defense, and that guy's going to get scored on. And so when you're dealing with a lot of that stuff, that's why in this era of positionless basketball, we tend to think of positionless basketball as like an offensive trait. But if it's going to be an offensive trait, it kind of has to have a corresponding defensive trait. You have to be able to guard multiple spots on the floor. And Rick Barnes, some of his favorite players that he's coached in terms of just guys that he could count on for defense were the, Meshacks, Yves Pons, Josiah Jordan James, guys who could guard anywhere from 3 to 5 positions on the floor. And what I'm saying there is, when you look at Evans, a guy who is 6'5" with a 6'10" wingspan, he can guard multiple positions on the floor because he's physical enough to go with there against some wings and some 4s probably. Heck, even in some games, maybe even throw him in there against the 5 occasionally. I've seen Barnes do that stuff. And if he can be also quick enough to stay in front of those smaller guards and kind of use that wingspan and be quick enough to keep them in front, then you got a guy who can defend 4 to 5 positions. And that in this era of basketball is huge.
It is very huge. And I want to touch on Amari's recruitment, because we have not touched on that. And
there you go.
We need to. Yeah. He picked Tennessee over Xavier and the hometown team, Pittsburgh. He also had some interest in TCU as well, took an official visit out there. But ultimately for Amari, it came down to his relationship with Rod Clark. And he certainly has a great relationship with Rick Barnes. I asked him about his relationship with Rick, and he said, well, when I called him and told him that I committed, he told me that he loved me. So what does that tell you about our relationship? And which is to be expected. That's how Rick is. And it's very genuine. A lot of coaches say that, but it's really genuine with Rick Barnes. But Rod Clark deserves a ton of credit in this recruitment. I mean, Rod was the biggest selling point for Amari, mostly because Amari trusted Rod's judgment and assessment, and he views Rod Clark as somebody who is more than just a basketball coach to him, more than just a recruiter. I mean, they are thick as thieves. They have become really tight the last 2 years or so. Amari's taken several visits to Tennessee unofficially and then officially. I believe Amari, if I remember correctly, Amari's official visit was opening weekend for football against Chattanooga. So that last weekend in August that crossed over with the first weekend of September, Amari was on campus for his official visit. And just Rod Clark was a huge catalyst in Tennessee being able to land Amari Evans just because of the relationship that they built. And Amari told me that, like, if it boiled down to I'm no longer able to play basketball for some reason, I know that Coach Clark is still going to be with me through thick and thin. And it's more than just basketball. He wants to see me develop as a man, and for future roles that I may have in the future, like being a dad or a husband. Like, I know Coach Clark is always going to be there for me. And really, this is I thought the cool aspect of their relationship. Amari told me that he felt, even if he elected to go somewhere other than Tennessee, he felt like Coach Clark was still going to be there for him and still be essentially a friend, because Coach Clark is younger. I think he's 32, 34 years old.
The cool uncle. You know, Rick Barnes' dad, and then a lot of the other guys on the staff.
Rick's grandpa.
Cool. Yeah, grandpa.
Yeah. Rick's grandpa, Coach Gainey is dad. Coach Clark is the cool uncle, or the older brother that was like in high school when the parents had the kid, and there's like a 10 to 15 year age gap. That's Coach Clark. That's Rod. So I thought that was a really cool and telling comment when Amari told me, like, if I picked a different school, or if I didn't come to Tennessee, I still feel like me and Coach Clark were going to be tight and have a great relationship, and he was still going to be there for me. So there wasn't a lot of competition for Tennessee in this recruitment, but I don't think that's telling of Amari's ability or anything. I think it's telling of Tennessee was in here from the jump. I think part of that goes back to the ties with Zakai Ziegler and the AAU program, the Lightning program there in New York that Zakai played with, and then Amari came through. There are some mutual connections there that I think allowed Tennessee to see Amari early, and Amari and Rod Clark hit it off very quickly, and Tennessee was always the front runner for Amari. So credit to Tennessee for getting in on this one early. And Amari isn't with all the hoopla that comes in today's recruiting. He's not worried about NIL. He's not worried about taking 1 million visits to up his NIL offers at other schools, this, that, and the other. It's all about basketball. Again, he's a basketball junkie, and it's very much – he very much has the same mindset that Tennessee's basketball program has. So Tennessee got in on that one early, and it paid off in a big way because they were the front runner all along, and all you got to do is track the visits with that one.
Yeah, if you're a top 100 player, though, don't just be accepting chicken scratch. You know what I mean? Get a little bit now. Get a little bit now.
Amari was taken care of.
Yeah, that's you better say you got to get a little something there. But
there were schools that he could have picked if he wanted to.
Well, yeah, but that's an awkward transition to what I was about to say, because what I was about to say had nothing to do with that, but it is about another school. So I don't want anybody to think I was talking about Xavier necessarily there. But I'm saying, when you talk about his offer list, to me, there are certain programs that if they're in there too in that recruitment, that means, hey, this really might be a gem. This might be a guy who's better than his rating. Xavier's one of those programs. They take guys, and they've been up and down a little bit, but consistently they've got a couple dudes on their team every year. They usually weren't the hugest prospects, but they turn into really, really good basketball players, and they do big things. That's a program that, man, you know, they know what they're doing more often than not. And so they're one of those programs that when they're in on somebody too, I'm like, okay, I see it. And it used to be like Villanova was the same way for a long time. Like if they were in on like a 3-star, you'd be like, something's going on there. This might be better than that. And obviously Evans isn't a 3-star, but I'm saying there are programs that when they're involved, it just piques my interest. And that's one of them.
TCU kind of,
yeah.
I would put TCU in that tier as well.
Yeah, and TCU can throw money around too. Like TCU can go in there and make hay. They're in Texas, right? You know, they're filling that's with money. Yeah, but this is a big one for Tennessee, Ben. And before we get out of here, how would you say, or in terms of what might be next, even if it's not who could be next, like what could be next, because we know now that Tennessee is very selective in recruiting, very, very selective. It's not like they don't offer guys, like they do, but especially with how well they've been able to get guys out of the portal and how picky they are and what kind of guys they want. If they see something they don't like one red flag and they can be out. And so they're very picky, but they're still going to be in on a bunch of guys. So which guys are they still kicking around with? What could be next?
Yeah, there's several guys that are still in the mix just because Tennessee's going to have so many scholarships open. They now have 2 in the boat with Amari Evans, and picked up a commitment from Dwayne Brown out of Hoover, Alabama, back in the spring, the center. So they now have a center and a versatile wing. I guess the latest development is Chance Mallory. He's a point guard who was committed to Virginia and decommitted within the last couple of days following the retirement of Tony Bennett. That one's opened back up, and he was here earlier this year on an unofficial visit. So I would expect that one to pick up pretty quickly in Tennessee's favor. I think he had strong interest in Tennessee to begin with, but maybe Tennessee wondered about his size. He is shorter, but he can also shoot the heck out of the basketball. So he is a heck of a shooter, and I think Tennessee's going to kick the tires there and try to get him in on an official visit this month. So that's one to keep an eye on. We are recording this on Friday afternoon, early Friday afternoon, in anticipation of Amari's announcement tonight. So if you are listening to this on Friday night, or if you're listening to this on Saturday or later, Isaiah Dennis out of the state of North Carolina, I believe he is firmly a top 50 overall prospect in the country. He is set to announce with 24/7 on Saturday afternoon. Tennessee has been in the mix there. He was actually in town back-to-back weekends. His last 2 visits were to Knoxville for the Florida game, to Knoxville for the Alabama game, canceled his Kansas official visit to be in Knoxville for the Alabama game. So that would obviously indicate that things are well, but I do not anticipate him picking Tennessee on Saturday. I think Wake Forest or North Carolina would be more likely for the North Carolina prospect. I think North Carolina and Wake Forest were willing to step up more than Tennessee was in certain regards. And
it ain't a crime. Yeah, it ain't a crime.
Yes, and I kind of view Wake Forest as the front runner in that one. So we'll see what he ultimately decides to do. Isaiah Dennis, that is, on Saturday, but I don't expect it to be Tennessee. That was the other possible commitment for Tennessee that was coming up in addition to Amari. That felt good because he was here on back-to-back weekends for Florida and Alabama, as I mentioned. But I view him staying in-state to where the in-state schools prioritized him in a major way. The other 3 to keep an eye on right now are the big 5 stars. Braden Burries from out in California. They're trying to finalize an official visit for him for this month or next month. It's just hard to get those West Coast kids over on this side of the country for official visits when they have so much going on during the school year. And he has 3 siblings. So there's just a lot of moving parts, and he's playing basketball AAU-wise on the weekends and different events and tournaments. But Tennessee, I think, is in the thick of that one. And nationally, Tennessee has not been linked to Braden Burries a ton. But I think if Tennessee can get his feet in Knoxville, get him to campus, I think there's a great chance that he ends up being a Vol, quite frankly. But they got to get him here, and they are in the works. It's a headache for a large family to get over to the other side of the country for an official visit. So we'll see if they're able to get him on campus. Chris Senac, there's been a lot of talk on our board about him over the last month or so. The 5-star who was here earlier this month on an official visit, viewed as the best big man in the country. I think it's down to Tennessee and Houston for that one. There's some LSU buzz there because he's from New Orleans. He's up in Missouri playing at Link Academy, but he's from New Orleans. I don't see the LSU Tigers being a front runner in that one as a lot of people think. maybe they swoop in at the last minute. But I think it's down to Tennessee and Houston in that one, and that would be a big deal for Tennessee. Again, 5-star best big man in the country. He's looking to possibly announce this month and sign early when that period opens up as well. And I think Tennessee's situated in a good spot there. And then the last one, Nate Ament, he was here for the Alabama game, another 5-star. I kind of do view CNAC slightly ahead of Nate Ament simply because CNAC is looking to make a decision right now. Nate Ament is looking to make a decision in the spring. And I think there's no way that you get both of those guys because they're both big men and they're both 5-stars. It typically does not work out that way. So in an ideal world, you at least land one of the two. And again, I think it's down to Tennessee and Houston for CNAC. And then with Nate Ament, he's got a ways to go before he makes his decision. But as we're recording this, Tennessee is currently visiting him in Virginia. Tennessee's entire staff is, well, not the entire staff, but Rick Barnes, Justin Gainey, and a couple of other staff members are in Virginia right now visiting with him as we speak. And he and Rick Barnes have a great relationship. So I don't know that he ends up in Knoxville if Chris CNAC ends up picking Tennessee, again, because he's a fellow 5-star. But if you miss on CNAC, then I think Nate Ament is also a very realistic possibility. I think Tennessee is in the thick of it for both of those 5-star big men, and you just got to make sure you land one of them.
Yeah, and if you're a 5-star prospect and you have that much bet on yourself instincts, waiting till the spring, you're going to be do your role, and you could buy your own island. Basically, at that point, with people desperate to get a 5-star big man like that.
And nowadays, that may be part of the reason why.
I judge nobody for it. People who want that, great. People who don't, people have other priorities, great. I mean, it's life-changing money. Why would you turn it down?
Well, my thing is, I agree with you, but I would say it shouldn't be your number one priority. You should make sure that you're being smart and taking care of yourself. Basketball should be the number one priority.
Oh, for sure. But if they're close basketball wise,
yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I would say. But anyways, this was a good episode, Ben. We got a lot to talk about. This is a big addition for Tennessee, one that I think people, the day that this kid signs and Tennessee can talk about him, I think people will then 100% believe what we're saying about how much that Tennessee loves this kid. And
Evans, that is.
Yeah. Yes. And we'll see what happens with the ratings and all that. But this is a guy who the staff believes is a big boom. So this is another addition for Tennessee on the recruiting trail. In basketball, you got smaller rosters, so these things are even bigger than they are in football in terms of the importance. So we got to get this one out to you. We've cut it up. We're going to throw it out there to y'all. But for now, if you're watching on YouTube or if you're watching on Facebook, this will be the end of this experience. If you are listening on one of the podcast apps, you will hear the outro after this. But regardless, we're about to hear from Ben for the final time today. So Ben, thanks, man.
Absolutely. Can you hear the construction going on at my house?
A little, but no, I didn't want to ask what it was or but I was like, well, something's going on over there. But I mean, again, I have you know how it is. We got a 5-year-old corgi and a soon-to-be 3-year-old boy here. It's always a madhouse.
My father-in-law is putting in shelves in my garage as my Christmas present.
Nice. So, what a father-in-law of the year right there. That's good.
His idea, his timeline, all that. So that if you heard any construction, that is what you heard.
If it is for free, it is for Ben McKee.
1,000%. It looks awesome too. I'm excited about it because I moved earlier this year, back in the thick of basketball season when Dalton Connect was doing Dalton Connect things, and I am not ashamed to admit that I still have boxes that I need to unpack. So it is a huge help to finally get my garage in order because the baseball team decided to win a national championship, and then before I knew it, it was football season, and now it's basketball season.
Well, yeah, but we knew that because we can see your walls.
That's true. That this is another I have ideas of what to do with the space behind me. Haven't gotten to it yet. Tennessee football, basketball, baseball. I need one of y'all to stop being great. Okay, you're taking up too much of my time because you keep winning.
Yeah. So just lose again for a couple weeks. That's all. But, thanks for being here, Ben. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Wes.